Let's do a quick review, 2-minute review. On Perek Aleph, we learned about the animal soul. By the way, we didn't call it the animal soul on Perek Aleph. We didn't give it a name there, but we know that it's the animal soul. We're going to give it the name later on. And we said the animal soul is the energy that God put in each and every organism to survive. And that energy does not think about God. That energy thinks about the organism. So the only concern of that soul is to make sure that the organism will survive, will be comfortable, will be healthy. So, in other words, it has a drive. The drive is to think about self. That's where the word selfish comes from. And even when it thinks about other people, don't fool yourself that it cares about other people. It's only there to think about other people. It says, I care about you because I can gain something from it. And then we said, you should know that by Jews, it also has a quality that it's able to actually think about another person. It's very tiny little bit, but it's there by every Jew. Yeah? And it's not guaranteed to be there by any non-Jew. That's where we ended Perek Aleph. Perek Bet, we started to talk about another soul that we have. That's why we're all schizophrenic. We have two souls who are thinking different things at the same time. They're in the same situation. One is thinking one way and the other one is thinking another way. The second soul, we tried to give it an analogy. And the first analogy we gave is from Va'ipach be'apav nishmat chayim. God created the entire world through speech. And when it came to that soul, it wasn't just a speech. God took energy from himself, godly energy, and he transferred it into man. So that's the second soul by the Jew. That was the first example we gave. And then we also started to give the second example. The second example was that of a seed that came from the father's brain, if you remember. And then we had a question. That's where we ended last time. The question was as follows. It says, if each and every one of us is a seed of God, how come spiritually we seem to be so different one from another? I'm not talking about just us. Us compared to Rabbi Akiva. We should all be Rabbi Akiva. We should all be Solomon. If only we have godly spirit. The godly spirit of someone like Abraham cannot be compared to someone like us. It's a whole different level. When it says that Abraham woke up early in the morning in order to do God's commandment to shecht his son, to kill his son, it says Abraham was happy. He was energized. Why he was happy and energized? Because he was going to do God's bidding. Now that's a level that none of us would ever reach. And you're telling me that my soul is the same as Abraham? Come on. It doesn't make sense. How can you tell me that my soul is the same thing as this? And even in our generations, there's many levels. Some people are more sensitive to godliness. Some people are less sensitive to godliness. And don't make the mistake to think it has anything to do with being religious or not. It's got nothing to do if you're religious or not, sensitivity to godliness. You can be the biggest criminal in the world and be sensitive to godliness. And you can be the biggest rabbi in the world and have no sensitive to godliness. There's nothing to do. So how do we see this? How is it possible that we have so many different levels? That's where we were last time. Okay. So let's start on page 8. That's where we ended last time. That's the question we asked last time. On page 8, we said there's a level of the neshama right there on the top. Nishamot ha'avot, the souls of our forefathers, Moshe Rabbeinu, the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, al nishmatenu, al neshamot doratenu elu, the ikvei meshicha, on the souls of our generation, the souls of our generation are called the heels of Mashiach. Now let me explain just a little bit, what does it mean? Why do we say it's the heels? See, one of the most sensitive organs in the human body is the brain. One of the least sensitive is the heel. So he says, what do you mean I'm saying least sensitive? I can take a piece of metal, and I can put it through my heel, and no problem. I'm not even feeling it. That's how not sensitive it is to godliness. So he's saying over here, there's neshamas like us for today, that you can take godliness away from them completely. They don't care. And then you have the neshamas of the brain, who any small little things over there will affect them completely. You want to tell me that we come from the same source? That's hard to believe. שהם בחינת הקוויים ממש לגבי המוח והראש. They are in some neshamas over here in our generation are like heels compared to the intellect, the brain, to the head. וכן בכל דור ודור, and this is also in every generation itself. So if we compare ourselves to other generations, we are the heels of the other generation. But you would think to yourself, but yeah, maybe I'm a heel compared to the other generations, but I'm ahead compared to my generations. So he says, not necessarily. וכן בכל דור ודור, and also in each and every generation, יש ראשי אלפי ישראל. They are the heads of the Jewish people. This is, by the way, something that not many people know, so it's a tidbit, not to do with us. But the word Rabbi means Rosh Bnei Israel. That's what the acronym of Rabbi means, the head of the Bnei Israel. And one has a Rabbi in every generation. Yeah, the Rabbanim of every generation are the heads of that generation. Rosh Bnei Israel are the head of the sons of Israel. שנשמותיהם מבחינת ראש ומוח לגבי נשמות ההמון. So also in our generation, there are some souls who are very sensitive to godliness, just like the brain is sensitive to godliness. And there are some souls who are like the heel or like the nails. They're not sensitive to godliness at all. It's a question if they're alive. Your nail grows, but is it alive? ועל הארץ, וכן נפשות לגבי נפשות. And by the way, this gets to be very complicated manner. Because when we're saying souls, in the souls there's many levels. So you can have your nefesh to be on a high level, and your ruach or neshama to be on a low level. So it gets very, very complicated. Like DNA, it depends on many aspects. What level of a soul one would have. כי נפש כלולה מנפש רוח ונשמה, because the word soul, nefesh, has in it by the way, it has 5 levels. The Alter Rebbe does not going to mention all 5 levels, because on the level of Chaya and Yechida, there's nothing much we can do. There's a little bit we can do later on, we're going to learn about it. Yeah? But most of the work that we can do with ourselves, to refine ourselves, has to do within these 3 levels. 3 levels that are called Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. These are the 3 levels that we can really have some effect on. The level of Chai Yechida, sometimes we can use it, but mainly this is where we're going to dwell, on these 3 levels of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama. And that depends on what God gave you. Each one has got a different level. Some souls are more sensitive, some souls are less sensitive. Some souls have a nefesh which is sensitive and a ruach that is not sensitive, and so on and so forth. You can have a lot of combination. Mikol makom, but it tells you nevertheless you should know. Shoresh kol nefesh ruach v'neshama, the source of every 3 levels of the soul called nefesh ruach and neshama, kulam מראש כל המדרגות, so it doesn't matter if you're going to take Moses, the head of all the levels, ad sof kol dergin, to the lowliest Jew, whoever that lowliest Jew is, hamelubash beguf amei haaretz, that is dressed in the body of the simple folks, vekal shebekalim, and the criminals, nimshach mimoach ha'elyon. They all come from the same godly source. It's God's brain. They all come from God's brain. Shehi chochma ilah. And that God brain, there's a name for it. The highest intellect. You remember we had a conversation before. The Maharal Prague didn't like when you called God the highest intellect. But in the end, even he admitted to the Rambam, that God is one with his highest intellect. You remember we had this conversation last time. Kivyachol. So now the question is the question that we asked last time, becomes even stronger. How is it possible that me and Moshe Rabbeinu both came from God's intellect, and he, I understand, you can see it by him that he comes from God's intellect. He behaves like he comes from God's intellect, while I don't feel any godliness. I don't feel godliness at all. I'll tell you to what extent I don't feel godliness. It's strange to say it, and we were all going to be truthful to ourselves. We will have to say it. I get excited more from ice cream on Shabbos than I do from putting on tefillin every morning. The ice cream on between me and between you and me, I'm not so big into ice cream. But it excites me more. Look, you call that sensitivity to godliness? Tefillin connects me to God. Doesn't excite me. Ice cream? Oh, my eyes light up. Exactly. But you say I have a godly soul like Moshe Rabbeinu. Can you see Moshe Rabbeinu get excited from ice cream? No, he doesn't get excited from ice cream. Why do I do? Why don't I get excited from God? Moses also had a body, right? He also had a body. But his godly soul was excited from godliness. I don't get such excitement. The excitement I get from a new iPhone that I get, or a new phone, Android that I get, a new car, whatever it is, everybody can see it in themselves. He says, how can we compare to God? How can we compare to people like Moshe Rabbeinu? So now he's going to explain. I am telling you that you and Moshe Rabbeinu's soul is the same thing. They both came from the God, from Chochma Ilah, which means from the highest level of godliness. How is that possible? So now he's going to explain to us. He's going to give us an analogy, and through the analogy we're going to understand how we both came from the same source. Kemashal, the analogy is like this. We're going to give the analogy for me. Everybody knows me and my son. Right? Everybody knows Mendel, my son. So that's what we're going to use, me and Mendel. Kemashal, haben hanimshach mimoach ha'av. For example, Mendel came from my intellect. So you're saying, what do you mean he came from my intellect? He came from my drop, not from my intellect. He didn't come from my intellect, he came from my drop. But I says, no, hey, wait 1 second. My personality, my intellect, my intelligence, my emotions, the way I am, DNA-wise, in other words, my personality, me, whom I am, where is it? It's in the person's brain. From the person's brain, it traveled down, however it traveled down, and it became, in other words, when it was in my brain, it had no substance. It was spiritual. My identity, my intelligence is not a physical thing. It's a spiritual thing. If I'm kind or not kind, that's a spiritual thing. If I'm smart or not smart, that's a spiritual thing. It's not a physical thing. So that spirituality became physicality. How did it become a physicality? It became physicality in the drop. So the drop is a reflection of my brain, of my identity, of who I am. So the same thing, we're going to take the analogy with God. God has a personality, whatever God's personality is, and that became physical. That physicality is called the soul. So if that physicality is called the soul, the children should reflect the father. Right? The children should reflect the father. I know the mother gets involved. Take the mother out of the equation now. You see soon why. In the next chapter. We're going to discuss the mother. For right now, we don't care about the mother. So
except if the mother is not Jewish, you don't have a godly son.
Very good. So that's why I said we're going to discuss the mother soon. What does she do? כמשל הבן הנמשך ממוח האב. So think about Mendel. Mendel came from where he has my personality. Ingrained, by the way, not just learned. Even if you would have taken Mendel, my Mendel, when he was 2 days old, and you would adapt him to somewhere else, he would still have my personality. Because that's an ingrained thing. IQ, kindness or not kindness, yeah, that would be part of his makeup. And look at now Mendel. In Mendel itself, in the new organism that's called Mendel, we have different levels. What are we talking about? We have the brain of Mendel. The brain of Mendel is very similar, theoretically, to my brain. My IQ transfers over to him. My personality transfers over to him in cases. It transfers over. But it doesn't only transfer all the things to his brain. You know where it's even transferred to? שאפילו ציפורני רגליו, even the nails in his feet. By the way, all this information was written before we knew about DNA. Not only the Alter Rebbe is before DNA, the Alter Rebbe takes it from the Gemara. The Gemara is written 2,000 years ago. And they knew that in the nails of the child, you have the personality of the father. DNA. The DNA, exactly what it is. They knew then. That's something that was discovered when? You probably know. In the 1900s probably. Right? שאפילו ציפורני רגליו, even the nails in his leg. And why do we say the nails in his legs? Because the nails in his legs are dead. They're not even alive. How do I know they're dead? Because if you cut them off, you don't even feel the pain. They're completely dead. There's no pain. There's nothing there. They have no life whatsoever. So the brain, which is really alive, and the nails, which is really, you can say, have got nothing to do with my brain, both came from the same source. נתהוו מטיפה זו ממש. They both were created from that little drop. How was it created from that little drop? So we're going to see now. שהייתה, that little drop, what happened to it? That drop was, now we're bringing the mother in, 9 חודשים בבטן האם. It was for 9 months in the stomach of the mother. The same drop. So listen very carefully what's going to happen now. The same drop, the mother takes a drop, she makes from a part of this drop becomes a brain, and another part of this drop becomes the nail. You will say, maybe she takes different parts of the drop. The answer is no. She could take the part that she made nails from and make it brain, and the part that she takes brain from and make it nail. So what does it depend for? How does the mother decide if this part of the drop, which is the same part, by the way, one becomes brain and the other one becomes nails. How does it become? So it goes like this. וירדה ממדרגה למדרגה. It takes the mother takes that little drop and makes it physical. In other words, the little drop has a spiritual element into it. It's, if you want to think about it, it's like a concentrate of the parents, of the father's spirituality. That's what the drop is. And the mother now is going to take that concentration and brings out the physical, spiritual into being. She will make the brain, she will make the heart, she will make the bones, she will make everything from that little drop. She's going to influence it. And how she's going to influence it? By the thing that she works on the most, will become physical things. The things that she works on least will become less physical. And that's why you see that the brain is the first thing by a baby. When you look at fetuses, it's all one big brain in the beginning, because that she works on the least. And the things, the nails, are the last thing to be formed. The nails and the hair are the last things to be formed by the baby. This is why preemies, when they are born, I think the lungs don't have those little follicles, hair follicles. That's why they can't breathe properly, because that's the last thing to happen, the nails and those things. So the things she work on more becomes more physical. The thing she works on least becomes more, remain, let's say it, more sensitive. Brain is more sensitive. It understands godliness. You know, your other parts of the body don't understand godliness as much as the brain. Let's call it this way. So the mother comes, וירדה ממדרגה למדרגה. He takes this drop down from one level to another level, להשתנות ולהתהוות מן הציפורניים. And the same cell that she made brain with, she cooked more time until she was able to make that same cell into nails. We're going to stop here for 1 second. Some tidbits that will help you see it in the Torah in many times. We know that the Gemara discusses what was the shortest pregnancy that we had. Does anybody remember who was the shortest pregnancy in the Torah? Very good. Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, we know he was a preemie, right? He was born how many months before?
3 months before.
3 months before. So it says, what does it symbolize? The fact that he was born 3 months before has a symbolism. It means that his neshama came down through this world. We're going to see there's 5 levels to this world. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And these levels are like the mother. They cook the soul. They're the one who makes the soul. But he went through them so quickly in 3 months, that's why he was a preemie, that he wasn't influenced, he didn't become physical. His physicality did not come into being, which means that his soul is very much similar to the father's. He became spiritual in his entire body. He's still almost a spiritual being. That's why Moshe Rabbeinu is Moshe Rabbeinu. And we are who we are. It's a symbolism. Now, it doesn't have to be like this all the time. By the way, another just tidbit, just for information, you know what was the longest pregnancy in the Torah? Eliyahu Navi. Eliyahu Navi was 12 months. Yeah, exactly the opposite of Moses. That's why he was able to go up with his body up to heaven. Yeah, there's another, just that you see that all the things that we're talking about over here, they're all things that you find constantly in the Torah. It's not just, Kabbalistic sayings and everything. It's really there, right there. If you look at the verses, you're going to start noticing all the details that we think over here. You're going to start. That's why Moshe was spiritual. By the way, another thing, since we're already discussing it, it says on Paro in the Midrash that Paro was a midget. Did you ever hear the Midrash that Paro was a midget? Yeah, it says that Paro was a midget. It's the famous Midrash. So it says, what does it mean that Paro was a midget?
Vertically challenged.
Vertically challenged, that's right. So there's a halacha that says if something is below a certain height, 1 meter tall, yeah, is below that height, he's considered to be like the ground, his physical space. So when it says that Paro was a midget, what does it mean? It means that Paro was a physical being. And when it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was 10 amas tall, if you remember later when he grew, it becomes there's a midrash that Moshe Rabbeinu was 10 amas. It says 10 amot, the idea of 10 amas is 5 meters, is not considered part of the world anymore, above 10 amas. Yeah. So all the things that, they're words in one thing, they have meanings behind them. Yeah. 10 amas have a definition. It means he is not a physical being. He's a spiritual being.
So how tall was Goliath?
Oh, very good question, and we'll have to discuss it. Goliath was much taller than Moses, and we'll have to understand. And by the way, we're going to see that there are going to be elements where the animal soul is going to be more powerful than the godly soul. And we'll discuss it when we get there. Very, very good. So we're going to have all these things put together, but that's later on. Right now, we're just touching it. Yeah. So let's go back to Mendel's brain and Mendel's nails. The nails, nevertheless, in Mendel's body, in the son's body, im kol ze odena, his nails, they're still קשורה ומיוחדת בייחוד נפלא ועצום. Those nails are completely connected. They're unified completely. במהותה ועצמותה הראשון, with her first essence. And what is the first essence? My brain. In other words, think about what I'm saying. It's true in the physical form. Today we know it. If I would read this Tanya 200 years ago, nobody would understand what I'm talking about physically, because people wouldn't know it from physically. In my Mendel's nail, you would find my personality. It is crazy he said it here. This is said from the time of the Gemara, that in Mendel's nails, there's my personality, there's my intellect, my emotional status. If I am going to be a lazy person or not a lazy person, if I'm going to, my intellect, everything, my entire being is there where? In the nails. So how come you don't see it? שהייתה טיפת מוח האב. That nail came, you know where it started? Over here spiritually in my brain. In my personality started there. וגם עכשיו בבן, and also right now, in my son himself, in Mendel himself, the reason, right now, the reason why the nails are growing right now in Mendel, there's only one reason why they're growing. Because they're connected to Mendel. Which means they're connected to the head of Mendel. If they wouldn't be connected to the head, I'll cut them off, they will stop growing, they will die. The only thing that they're alive now that makes them grow is the fact that they're connected to Mendel's brain. And now we're going to come to another completely different subject. The subject by Hasidim of why do you need a head? And who do we call the head? The Rabbi. Why by Hasidim it says it's important to be connected to the head. The Hasidim says always be connected to the Rabbi. What does the Rabbi symbolizes? If you disconnected from the Rabbi, what's going to happen? You don't get life. Life doesn't come. The nails will stop receiving life from the head. This is another attribute by Hasidim, which we're not going to discuss right now because we'll discuss it later on. But you can see how it's all connected over here. Without the Rebbe, without the brain of the child, nothing in the child is going to work. Everything needs to be connected to the brain in order to get his sustenance from the brain.
So how come Chabad doesn't have a Rebbe?
Very good question. Very good question. We'll have to say, your question is even so. How come in this generation, when the Rebbe is not over here in the physical form, how are we still alive? Forget Chabad. How's the entire world still alive? How are we still reconnected?
The Satmar's got a Rebbe.
Oh,
Chabad doesn't.
yeah, it's a good question.
Braslav don't have a Rebbe.
Question if we do or we don't.
Yeah, so we'll have to figure it out. Very good question. Yeah, yeah. In the physical form, for sure we don't.
Of course.
Yeah, right now we don't have. Yeah.
At least learn
Yeah.
stuff in this way.
So גם עכשיו, also now, בבן, in the son, יניקת הציפורניים וחיותם נמשכת מהמוח שבראש. So now, it means without Rabbeim, without Rebbes, without the brain of this generation, the entire generation is going to be disconnected from God. They're not going to get life, according to this. How do we know this? So it's going to start in the Gemara. Kedeito beGemara, it says, I learned it in the Gemara. What does it say? Luvan shemimeno. It says the whiteness in the baby. What's the whiteness in the baby? Gidim, the sinews, atzamot, the bones, ציפורניים, the nails. כמו שכתוב בעץ חיים שער חשמל, like it's written in the book of the Arizal, called עץ חיים, the tree of life, שער החשמל, the gate of electricity. But חשמל doesn't mean electricity. חשמל means one of the angels is called Chashmal. The reason why they call electricity because it's not understood. It works in a mysterious way, like an angel. Yeah, that's why they use the modern name today. Chashmal in Hebrew means electricity, but that's not what it means over here. Chashmal means one of the angels. בסוד לבושים של אדם הראשון בגן עדן. This is what it tells you about the garments of first man in Gan Eden, in heaven. Which, by the way, we're going to discuss this a little bit later in the chapter, so we're going to discuss it now. שהיו ציפורניים מבחינת מוח תבונה. It says the garments of Adam and Chava were, if you remember the Midrash, they were like scales. They had like nails all over the body. That was how their body was made, like a fish, like fish scales, the entire body. That's what it was. So it says, you can see that this, what does it mean? It means that God became physical. How did he become physical? He became Adam's brain, and Adam's brains created the nails all over his body. Okay? That's what it means. So both levels, Adam's brain is still God, connected to God directly, you can see it. But even the scales in Adam's body were created from the same drop. But the scales were only alive as long as they were connected to the body of Adam. Once they were disconnected, the scales didn't grow anymore. They were dead. וככה ממש כביכול, and this is how it is, בשורש כל הנפש, רוח ונשמה, in the source of every Jewish person, של כללות ישראל, of us, the entire generation, למעלה בירידתו ממדרגה למדרגה. Our souls came down one level, another level, another level, and every world made it more physical, more physical, more physical, until it reached our generation, which is the most physical generation there is.
Till the next one.
There is no next one.
We are the last.
That's it, we're the last generation. We're the Ikvas de Mashiach. You heard of that. We are the footsteps of Mashiach. That's what it says. And that was 250 years ago, almost 300 years ago was written. So I don't know what it means over there, but we'll have to figure that one also. It's a very good question. It should, according to this, it should have been then, in that generation. Why are we still doing it over here? We're going to discuss that question later on. Very good. How did the soul comes down? על ידי השתלשלות העולמות. The soul comes down through these four worlds, which we will discuss later on. The world of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Nesia. And every world made that spirituality more physicality. See, God is God is not a spiritual being. God is, I don't know what, whatever God is. Those worlds makes it more concrete, let's call it. Even concrete spirituality. Michochmato itbarach, but they all come from God's intellect. And how do we know this? So you'll see even that is written in the Torah. It's not like something new. He says, you say it every day. Kedechtiv, like it's written, kulam bechochma asita. The entire worlds you made in chochma. In other words, the creation is made through God's chochma. Everything, from the neshamot, from everything. Nitavu mimeno, and from that came nefesh, ruach, veneshama, the souls, the three levels of the souls, shel amay haaretz, of people like us. Upchutei ha'erech, and people without any value, people who don't feel godliness, who get excited over steaks much more than they get excited over tefillin. Ve'im kol zeh, but nevertheless, you should know that the DNA of God is in you, just like it is in whom? In Moshe Rabbeinu. You're the nails, he's the head. Ve'im kol zeh, nevertheless, without this, odena kshura u'meyuchedet, it's still one, beyechud nifla ve'atzum, in unbelievable unity, b'mahutan ve'atzmutan harishon, with the first source. That what's the first source? It's God's intellect.
What is the Hebrew word for intellect?
Chochmah. But we're going to see later, in Perek Gimel, we're going to discuss intellect. We're going to say that it's not what I'm saying. But we'll wait for Perek. Yeah. We'll wait for Perek Gimel to discuss it. Very good.
Chochmah is good enough.
Yeah. Shehi amshachat chochmah ilah. This is the continuation of the higher part of chochmah. Why? Ki yenikat v'chayut hanefesh ruach v'neshama shel amei haaretz. Which means today, right now, this was your question before. Where do we get our life from? Just like in Mendel's body, the nails and the hair and the liver and every part of his body gets sustenance from his head. The head is the one who starts the process to give everything life. So also by us, each and every one of us gets its life force מנפש רוח ונשמה של הצדיקים, from the nefesh ruach ochama of the righteous people. You're going to call me, but Rabbi, I don't know any righteous people. I looked around today, it's very hard to find righteous people. והחכמים, or the sages, ראשי בני ישראל שבדורם, those that are the head of the Jewish people, the Rebbe of their generation. So that's how we get the sustenance from. That's why it's very important to be connected to the tzaddik. Because without connection to the tzaddik, one cannot be alive.